Hello, and welcome to our conversation today. Today's conversation is about bipartisan leadership. We appreciate you taking time out of your day for this discussion. My name is CJ Deagle. I'm the state leader for Stand Up Republic here in the state of Arizona. Over the past 2 years, it's been my privilege to be part of this organization founded by Evan McMullin and Mindy Finn. Through this community, I had the opportunity to represent Arizona at a conference in Virginia in February of this year. It was at that conference that I had the honor of getting to know former CIA Director General Michael Hayden and his wife Janine. After one of the sessions, they pulled me aside and asked me what I thought of Mark Kelly. Janine told me, "We like Mark." Then she shared with me the story of how Mark Kelly and his wife Gabby Giffords visited General Hayden in the hospital after his stroke. That simple act of kindness made an indelible impact on my views of Mark Kelly and Mark's willingness to set partisanship aside to show his humanity. I'm proud to be a part of the Stand Up Republic community and express my gratitude to my friends, Evan and Mindy, for founding this movement. With that, I'll turn it over to Evan to say a few more words about our mission and organization.
Thank you, CJ. I so appreciate your leadership in Arizona, and thank you for that wonderful introduction to this event. And thank you to all who are joining us today, and especially to our special guest, Mark Kelly. Before we get started, as CJ mentioned, I'll say a few things about our work at Stand Up Republic. Many of you are well aware of it. Others may be joining us for an event for the first time. We are a national organization with members in every state and in every congressional district. We unite Republicans, Democrats, and independents around our foundational American values and in defense of our system of self-rule. And we are proud to have, as I said, a cross-partisan membership. Many of our members are principled and former Republicans or right-leaning independents, but we also have Democrats with us, all united, again, as I say, around our foundational principles. And so that's the spirit that in which we do our work. That includes advocacy work in Washington, trying to advance reforms that are essential for our system of self-government. But also we get involved in elections and help unifying leaders prevail, and divisive leaders and those who present dangers to our democracy, we help them not prevail, to put it kindly. And so that's our work. We also advance electoral and other reforms at the state level around the country. And many of you have been very actively engaged in that work for years now, since the founding of Stand Up Republic in 2017. We thank you for all of your work and for your partnership in these efforts. Today, we're so honored to be able to hear from Mark Kelly. Mindy Finn, as the Stand Up Republic's co-founder, will introduce Mark. Before I do that, I want to, I guess, take care of a little bit of housekeeping in just saying that, this is a conversation that this is not a campaign event, consistent with 501c4 regulations. We're a 501c4 organization. This will not be a discussion about the election in Arizona, about the presidential election specifically. We will not advocate for the election or defeat of anyone, although in other forums we certainly do that. But in this forum, we're here to talk about unifying cross-partisan, bipartisan leadership with a man who is offering that to Arizona and to the country. And we're eager for that discussion. Mindy, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, CJ, and thank you, Evan. As Evan said, I'm Mindy Finn. I'm the co-founder of Stand Up Republic, and here we're really proud of working in a cross-partisan way. We seek to model the type of cross-partisan collaboration and problem solving and bridge building that we believe the country needs to have, that we need to see in our elected leaders in order to get to solving the problems for the American people and to address modern challenges head on. And it's in that spirit of service to the country and putting country over party that we welcome Captain Mark Kelly to this call today, and we're really thrilled to have him, as well as all of you who are tuned in. Captain Mark Kelly is a retired U.S. Navy combat pilot engineer and a NASA astronaut. He lives in Tucson with his wife, former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords. He's the son of 2 police officers, and he went to public school, from elementary school through the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy and U.S. Naval Postgraduate School. He made 2 deployments and flew 39 combat missions in Operation Desert Storm. In 1996, he was selected as an astronaut, and he flew 4 missions aboard the space shuttle before retiring from NASA in 2011. And now Mark is running for the U.S. Senate in Arizona, and he's on his next mission, which is to represent Arizona in the United States Senate. And I'll just say before turning it over to Mark that we invite him here today because we really appreciate the way that he has kind of demonstrated, again, this spirit of working together to solve problems and to serve the country. Captain Kelly, Mark, if I can call you that, we're so thrilled to have you today, and I would turn the floor over to you.
Well, thank you, Mindy. Thanks for the introduction. And Evan and CJ, thank you so much. General Hayden, I'm a big fan of his for a long time, and it's good to see that he's doing well. I just want to say hi to everybody. And, first off, let me start with, I decided to run for the United States Senate to try to, bring folks together from different backgrounds and different walks of life. But, it's not just about, this election. We've got some significant problems we're facing right now, and we can't solve them in partisan corners. And we're at a really critical and a crucial moment for our country and for the state of Arizona. And I just think that what we're facing right now as a country is different than anything we faced before. We've got a public health crisis that spurred this really horrible economic crisis. But both of these things have been made worse by a crisis of leadership. And the reality is that we can't tackle our country's biggest challenges by continuing to retreat into these partisan corners that Washington often finds themselves in. Now, when I was growing up in New Jersey, I did not dream of ever running for elected office. My dream as a little kid was that I dreamt of becoming the first person to walk on the planet Mars. Turned out, I didn't make it. But I did have the opportunity to serve our country in the Navy for 25 years, spent 15 years of that at NASA flying the space shuttle. But early in my Navy career, I was stationed in the Western Pacific for a while, for nearly 3 years. And I made a couple deployments on an aircraft carrier. Well, I spent a lot of time on this aircraft carrier, the USS Midway, but on 2 different occasions deployed to the Arabian Gulf. And I flew 39 combat missions in the first Gulf War. And then I went to grad school, became a test pilot and then an astronaut. And I flew into space 4 times. Twice, the last 2 flights, I was had the opportunity to be the commander of the space shuttle, which is a great job. So I did get, I got a little closer to Mars. But like a lot of folks out there, the path for me to achieve my personal goals and my dreams, that was not always clear to me. Because when I was growing up, I was not the best student, especially in elementary school and in middle school. I really struggled, but it was my mother who really inspired me, because when I was a little kid, my mom, she was a secretary and a waitress at the same time. She'd have 2 jobs to make ends meet. And then she decided to become a police officer like my dad. But this was New Jersey in the 1970s, so it was really hard. And I watched my mother work incredibly hard at this. I mean, so hard, and she was successful, and it really motivated me. And I buckled down in school, and I was eventually able to take my public school education, went off to one of the 5 federal service academies, the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy, and then into the Navy, and then eventually was able to get to NASA into the astronaut corps. And it was during my time at NASA that I really learned how to work with and lead people from different backgrounds. Because when you're orbiting the Earth at 25 times the speed of sound and a problem comes up, you don't have time to worry about the background of the person offering the solution. You got to figure things out together as a team. And after those experiences, I thought I knew a lot about public service. But then I met my wife, my future wife, Gabby. And Gabby showed me a whole different side of public service. She's the one who taught me how you can use public policy to improve people's lives. And right now, we're seeing just how important it is that our leaders are focused on the lives of American citizens and how to use the tools at their disposal to help people. Now, this pandemic has really pushed our healthcare system, especially, to the brink, and it has devastated our economy. And I think all of us feel a lot less certain about what the future for our country is going to look like. So I think we deserve leaders who can figure out a path forward and work in a nonpartisan and independent way to get things done. And, if successful and if I have the opportunity to serve in the United States Senate, there's a lot I want to focus on. One thing is trying to fix some of the flaws in our healthcare system that have been exposed and made worse by this pandemic. Price of prescription drugs are too high. Folks are often worried that if they have a pre-existing condition, if they could lose those protections. But we also have to really think about how we're going to rebuild our economy and come up with a plan that really looks towards the future. And I think that means, really supporting small businesses, but also focusing on science and technology and investing in STEM education and job training, apprenticeships. We've got to give young Americans the skills they need, whether or not they're heading to college or not. And, we've got to do these things, and then we've got to protect, programs that, seniors rely on, like Social Security, and Medicare, that are so important for seniors. And, I think that's what it means to be like an independent voice, for Arizona. And we desperately need, some new leadership in Washington. I often think that Washington is broken, and it's been broken for some time. So we have an opportunity to tackle some big issues that's so important to our country. Figuring out how do we get folks affordable health care, rebuilding the economy with an eye towards the future. And I would like to, if elected, take the opportunity to bring a focus on science and data and facts to Congress. So I'm looking forward to this important conversation we're going to have today. I often see Washington falling short on so many issues. I also, another leader that, like, General Hayden, another leader that I really respected, my commanding officer in my first squadron in the United States Navy, used to tell me all the time, and he was talking about operational stuff and aircraft carrier stuff and flying airplanes. He would say, if you're not changing it, it's getting worse. So change is important. I think we need some of that now more than ever. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for sharing that. And in the spirit of some of the things you said, we have a couple of questions. And one of those questions comes to us from Braden. And he's asking, if in the spirit of bipartisanship, who are some Republican members of the Senate that you either admire or that you look forward to working with in order to find common ground to find solutions to these problems?
Yes. So at a very young age, I was in my early 20s as a Navy pilot going through flight school. There was one guy we really looked up to as another naval aviator, and that was John McCain. That was when I was in flight school in the 1980s. And then, you often think about, for folks who served in the military, you got to go to SEER school, and you think about, what happens, and you plan for this. What happens if you ever got shot down? He was the example of how you serve our country under a really challenging set of circumstances, a horrible situation. And then later to meet him, get to know him, one day call him, a friend, was very important to me. We often don't get to meet our heroes, right? And so I had the opportunity to do that. And I think he was a very good example of somebody who was able to put party and partisanship aside to work across the aisle, to make decisions that were in the best interest of our country, and not necessarily in the best interest of politics or his party. So I always looked up to John McCain. I think he was a very good example of representing a state in the United States Senate in a really very honorable and independent way. So if I wind up in the United States Senate here in after this election, I'm going to look across the aisle to build friendships. It was something my wife Gabby was really good about. I mean, she had one of her closest friends in the U.S. House of Representatives was a guy named Ted Poe. Ted Poe was a very conservative Republican from Texas, and Gabby and Ted were buddies. And she didn't agree with him on everything, but she was very fond of him, and she worked. They worked on some things together. And I'll be looking for folks on the on the other side of the aisle. I have some relationships now, but I'll look to expand those if I'm given the opportunity. Thanks, Braden. Thank you.
Thank you for that. You gave some great examples of some national issues, given the crisis that we have going on right now. I know an issue that's near and dear to my heart here in the state of Arizona is the issue of water. And on a national level, Arizona is in a unique place as part of the lower Colorado river system for accessing water. This is going to be an issue in which the Arizona delegation is going to have to negotiate and work things out with the rest of the country. I just like your thoughts on that and kind of where you see the future of Arizona water and Arizona's role in finding solutions to our water issues here in the state.
Yeah, they're significant, and we've got to address them. Lake Powell and Lake Mead, if you pay attention to the water issue right now, are below 50% capacity each. Now, Lake Mead, the level in Lake Mead is subject to how much water we release from Lake Powell, but both of those are under 50% right now, and we are part of the lower Colorado River Basin, with California and New Mexico, Nevada, and we're going to wind up here in the next year or so in what's called the drought contingency plan. That takes us out for 6 years. But when that happens, because of the way water rights for the lower Colorado River Basin, our water rights are subservient to other states. It was part of the negotiation when the Central Arizona Project was built. So this was a deal that was made in the 1960s. So what happens is, we're going to have to cut back before other states. And if we get into the drought contingency, we're going to have to cut back by 18% of the water we get from the Colorado River. Right now, we get 39% of Arizona's water comes from the Colorado River. We're going to have to reduce that 39% by 18%. So we could do the math on how much less water that is. It's a significant amount of water. And because of the way the water rights are divvied up within the state, the county that has the worst impact is Pinal County, specifically Pinal County farmers. So they'll start pumping groundwater. They'll need to support their crops. So we've got these challenges that we face. And now I think the good thing is we have really good examples in our state of communities that have done really well with conserving water. And how do you address this problem? Yuma is a perfect example. I mean, Yuma has taken this seriously for decades now. In Yuma, they now grow more crops with significantly less water. So significantly more crops with a lot less water than they did in the 1980s, because they take conservation very seriously. We need to bring everybody together here before the year 2026, when the drought contingency plan, 2026 is when we get to the Colorado River guidelines. We've got to bring all the stakeholders together: farmers, tribal nations, communities, political leaders, and look for how are we going to tackle this as a state. I also think that long term, our water issues here in the state are tied to, climate change. So we've got to tackle the issue of climate change. We can't wait a decade or two to do that.
Thank you, Mark. If I could just jump in here, CJ asked as an Arizonan, a very specific Arizona question, which is good. We want those. I have a higher level, sort of almost a philosophical question for you. Yeah, I read your op-ed today, which you published on your intention to offer independent, unifying leadership, which I thought was really good. I encourage everybody to read it on AZ Central. But you mentioned the economic crisis that has been created by the health crisis in our country, and you say that partisan politics have made them worse. And then you go on to say, as you've mentioned here, that you believe in solving problems with in this piece with data and science. For shorthand, I might say truth and facts. But I'm intrigued by this, where you talk about how partisanship is making it difficult for us to solve problems, and you believe in solving problems with truth, with data, with facts. What's the relationship between those two things? When we become hyper-partisan, does that pull us away from truth and facts? And if so, why? And how does setting partisanship aside allow us to start solving problems for the American people with the use of truth and science and facts? And it certainly resonates with me, that idea, because I know someone like you, a former fighter pilot and astronaut. You're in harm's way, you're in life and death situations, and you just simply have to operate with truth, facts, and science. You don't have a choice. And so, I think you have some special insights in the relationship between partisanship and the lack of truth and facts used in solving problems, and what happens when we set partisanship aside and somehow we're able to embrace truth more. How does that work?
Well, I think it's important to recognize that regardless of party and somebody's political background or leanings, we all generally have the same goals in mind for our country, right? We want our kids to be well educated. We want to have an economy that is growing, and folks, regardless of their background, can be successful. We want our country to be secure. We want to be safe on our streets. I mean, all these things are it's almost like it's universal, whether you're a Republican, Democrat, or independent. And it's often where we get into is the approach. How do we get from where we are today to the ultimate goal? Because everybody wants prosperity, and everybody likes equality and opportunity. So how do you get there? And I think, embracing reality is a good first step. And that's where the data and the facts come in. And I often get frustrated when we see individuals, and this is on both sides of the aisle, offering, I hate to use the word alternative facts because somebody else used that, but stuff that isn't factual and isn't accurate. In my background as an engineer, as a pilot, a commander of the space shuttle, as a test pilot especially, well, the space shuttle thing too. I mean, data and facts, there's no other option. I mean, if you can't get the data right and you can't understand the data, you can't make good decisions. And I see our government often making poor decisions because it injects partisanship and politics into things instead of looking at, okay, what's the data? Where are we trying to get? What are the goals? How do we get there? Leaving the influence and the politics out. So I don't think I have a great solution. I think change is always good. I think diversity is good too. If elected to the U.S. Senate, I think I'll be the only person there with a graduate degree in engineering, and I think I'm only one of two that has any degree in engineering. So from the standpoint of on technical issues, it's something I've been doing my whole life. Maybe I can help convince folks that are often, maybe they have their alternative set of facts, and I can convince them that isn't actually the way we should approach this. But it is going to be, I recognize it's going to be a challenge. And I also recognize that I don't have all the answers and all the solutions. And I think it's important for the folks we elect to office, whether it's Congress or in state legislatures, that you elect people that understand that they don't have all the answers. I think we wind up getting into trouble with partisanship when everybody thinks that their idea is the best, that they know the right thing to do, that they have the answer. I recognize that I don't have all the answers, and I'm willing to change my mind on things too. But I'm gonna approach this as like, hey, let's try to come up with a fact-based and a data-based solution to the problems we face.
Thank you.
So I'll take a question actually from the audience. They're asking what one of your goals would be for those under the poverty line, especially children with troubling or no family support. And I'll editorialize that this is an increasingly troubling issue amid the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, here in the state of Arizona, I don't know what the statistics are in other states, but right now we have 440,000 individuals, and many of them have families, and they're trying to get by on $240 a week of unemployment benefits. That's what the weekly benefit is here in the state of Arizona. And there were additional benefits that came from the federal government, but those expired months ago. And Congress, both parties, have been unable to come to some agreement to try to provide some additional help. And those folks that are in that situation are now below the poverty line, far below the poverty line. And I've spoken to Arizonans who have had to make horrible choices about whether to pay the rent or fill a prescription or buy groceries for the week. I don't know if anybody's heard this before, but this saying that rent eats first, meaning that you have to pay your rent. I mean, you're gonna not buy groceries in order to pay your rent. And we've got a lot of folks here in the state of Arizona, and I'm sure in every state across our country that is in this situation. So when you're in a crisis, this is like the master alarm is going off in the space shuttle. You got to solve that problem first, and that is, we've got to solve the pandemic part of this, the public health crisis, and then we've got to solve the economic crisis. And I think in the short term, we have to support these families that through no fault of their own are now well under the poverty line. As we come out of this, how do we help people, get to a situation, an economic situation that's more stable for their families? I think in a lot of cases, it's often about education and trying to level the playing field, trying to provide a good public education for every young person. I'd be an advocate to spend more in Title I funding, to help schools be able to provide better education in certain areas of our country, and then provide economic opportunity. And there's a lot of ways that the government can do that.
Following up on that, this is another viewer question, and I actually had the same one, which is, this is from Kathy Varga. I think if you kind of look at it on through the optimistic lens, there's a lot of people who run for office and want to go to Washington to solve problems, but then they get there and they kind of run into barriers to do so. Can you speak to kind of your thoughts and ideas for any kind of systemic changes or other changes that can be made to help lead the intentions of being a problem solver as opposed to being part of the problem?
Yeah, I think there's a couple obvious things we could do that I would be an advocate for, that Senator John McCain was a big advocate for, and that was campaign finance reform. Getting the unlimited spending from corporations, dark money, out of our political system. He passed bipartisan legislation with Russ Feingold. Now, recently, over the years, that has been undone, and there was a Supreme Court decision, Citizens United, that basically undid the major pieces of that piece of legislation. So now corporations have the same political speech rights as individuals. And I don't think that's healthy for our democracy. So one of the things I did when I became a candidate for the United States Senate on the first day is I said I wasn't going to take any corporate PAC money, because what I believe that if I'm elected and get a chance to serve in the United States Senate, I'm going to make decisions that is in the best interest of the American people and the best interest of Arizonans, not what's in the best interest of some company that may have happened to write me a PAC check. So I think campaign finance reform would really help. And then I think for the House of Representatives, if we were able to address this issue of gerrymandering congressional districts, House districts, and making them very safe for a specific Democrat or a specific Republican, the situation that creates is you basically hand a lifetime job to a politician that all they have to do is be the most partisan person in their party if they have a heavily gerrymandered district, because then they will never lose a general election because it's gerrymandered. And if they're very partisan, they won't lose a primary either. So that's the situation we wind up in with a lot of House districts. There's 435 members of the House of Representatives, and on average, there's only about 40 that are competitive. My wife Gabby was in a competitive district. Now she was just by her nature was independent, was a moderate, and always wanted to work across the aisle. But she had to do that to be able to win a re-election and then win another re-election again. But that's not true for folks in these gerrymandered districts. So there is no incentive for them to compromise. So if we want to get to a point where our Congress functions better, those two things, get the corporate money out of the political system and end the gerrymandering of House districts would be very, very helpful.
So that brings up an interesting point in terms of the conversation about Arizona. If you were to be elected, you will be one of 2 Democratic senators representing our entire state. To me, that represents an outstanding opportunity for bipartisanship in that you're representing a state that is roughly a third Republican, a third Democrat, and a third independent, which goes back to the maverick nature of John McCain. Can you tell us a little bit about how you envision yourself operating in that environment where you need to represent all of us?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to recognize that 2 years ago, I was one of those registered independents, and I always voted for the person, not voted for the party. So my intention is to, represent all 3 of those thirds, Republicans, Democrats, and independents, in the best way I possibly can, and make decisions that are, not, that aren't partisan, that aren't political. Hey, what is in the best interest of all of us here in our state and in the country? I do know that folks often they get to Washington, D.C., they say one thing, they do another. I'm going to do the absolute best I can to, represent all of Arizona in a very thoughtful and independent way, independent from big corporations, independent from political parties. Like I said up front, this was not my lifetime dream to run for the United States Senate. I mean, I wanted to be the commander of the space shuttle and one day go to Mars. I wanted to fly airplanes off of an aircraft carrier. I got to do that. And then I took off the uniform. But eventually I realized that just taking that uniform off doesn't mean public service is over, that our country is too important. And it's also, our democracy is also rather fragile. I think we've seen that over recent years. And, I just felt I had to, step up and, try to do the best I can to help solve some of these problems we face.
Mark, I've got another question. I appreciate that. So often I feel like we get caught in our partisan bubbles and in our partisan tribes based on issues that are extremely divisive. And we all know what they are. We could list them. But, in your offering of leadership the way you are now and in talking to people around Arizona and nationally as well, have you seen any areas of unexpected common ground on divisive issues on, whether it's, it could be something, very, very pertinent to Arizona, like water, as CJ asked about. It could be a social issue. It could be, defense issue. Have you found any unexpected common ground where maybe other leaders and other people haven't recognized it, but where you've seen it?
Well, yeah, I think when here in Arizona, I know it's different in different states, but when you talk about water, we all get it. Democrats and Republicans understand the issue that we're facing. I mean, this is something that we need, and we need to come up with a solution. And I've seen strong bipartisanship there. I think border security is the same, similar issue for any border state. We need borders. Now there are differences, how is the best way, what's the best way to do this? But I think it's an area where we both, where we recognize that we do have an issue and we've got to apply, some sort of approach to it. And the approach might vary. I've seen even, from our president, he talks about the high cost of prescription drugs. I think we all realize that. And, if I was elected to the United States Senate and, President Trump was reelected, that's an issue that I would want to work with him on because it affects so many families. And I've seen and I've heard from, especially seniors who tell me about how the price of their prescription medication has gone up. I mean, recently I was hearing about 300% in a year. I heard an example the other day where this senior's medication went up by a factor of 7 in 1 year, 7x, and couldn't pay for it anymore. And we need reforms in that system. I think Medicare should be allowed to negotiate the price of prescription drugs, but also reforms in the patent system. And I think the administration in the White House, I think they realize that. So, that's somewhere where I think there could be a lot of common ground.
Thank you.
This has been a tough for almost anybody, and the pandemic doesn't know party or partisanship. It's just been a tough year. It's a tough year for the country. What are some of the things that give you hope as you travel around Arizona, across the country right now?
Well, I would say I haven't been traveling around the country much. And
look across what you can see from home. Yeah.
But also not much across the state this year, especially since March. Before that, I spent a lot of time on the road, meeting with a lot of folks. And I'd say the thing that gives me, hope, a couple things. One is, I think folks realize that we're all in this together. And I realized that as a young pilot on the space shuttle, seeing the Earth for the first time from low Earth orbit, big round ball just floating there in the blackness of space. I mean, you really get this sense that we are all in this together. And I think people get that. They get frustrated with Washington. They often feel Washington's broken. I agree with them right now. We've got a crisis in leadership. We're facing a pandemic, the likes of which we haven't seen in 100 years, more than 100 years. And these problems that we face are rather challenging to solve. But here's what gives me hope. As a country, there is no country better at solving hard problems than the United States. When we decide we want to tackle something, we can figure it out. I mean, remember, we're the country that sent people to the moon in the 1960s. I mean, think about how crazy that was. We can do hard things. We just have to realize that it's not one party that can do it. It's not Democrats, it's not Republicans, it's not independents. I think anything that is hard to solve, no single party can do it. But if we're willing to come together and work as a team, we can fix anything. So that gives me a lot of hope. And I often feel that from Arizonans as I traveled across and spent a lot of time on the road last year, especially, that people get that. And they know, they know that the United States of America is a special place. We got the smartest scientists and engineers, the best universities. We also have an approach, and I realized this from a lot of the work I did with on the space shuttle. We had a lot of partners on the International Space Station, so we would do things as a team. But when it was always interesting to me that the approach that we take as Americans, it's about there's one thing that comes first for us that's not universal. It does not extend to other countries. We are driven by the mission, by accomplishing the goal. That comes first, for us. when we decide to do it. If we can get the politics and the partisanship out, we are a very mission-driven country. And that gives me a tremendous amount of hope.
On that same lines of mission, if you're going into a hostile territory, shall we say, and you may not know who your friends are, you may not know too many people, you may not have been directly in that environment. How do you get the mission done, and what are your first priorities for making inroads and getting the long-term job done?
Well, I've been over hostile territory before in an airplane. I mean, I almost got shot down a bunch of times over Iraq. I had a S-6 missile blow up next to my airplane once. So I've had that experience, but then you know who the enemy is. I don't look at this as the same, right? I look at this going to the United States Senate. We're all on the same team. I mean, we might have our differences, but we're gonna try to figure this out and try to bring people together. We've got common goals. We all want the same outcome. It's just what the approach is. So if I'm fortunate enough to be elected, I'm going to go in there with a very positive attitude that this is about teamwork and working across the aisle, and hopefully I can be a part of trying to get us back on a better trajectory. I know a little bit about trajectories, and the one we're on right now, I'm not so sure it's sustainable. So I'm hoping to help, do a little orbit adjust burn and get us right back on the correct trajectory.
Thank you, Mark. I've got a bit of a personal question to ask you. I hope you won't mind it. In my preparation for this conversation, I talked to a number of people, Republicans actually, who have observed you over the years in Arizona. And, several of them said without prompting, they commented on the love and respect you demonstrate for your wife and for former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords. And again, this is a bit personal, but I think it's so important. Over the last 4 years, many Republican women or right-leaning independent women, have felt so disrespected and maligned by some of our leaders. And, that's caused them to sort of wonder where they fit politically, where they fit in the country. And then to hear so many people without prompting talk about how you demonstrate such love and respect for your wife. It just, it was such a contrast from so much of what we've been seeing over the last couple of years. And I think is important because it really speaks to the fundamental equal value of all. And we know that, women have been maligned over the last 4 years. We know that people have been attacked based on, their religion and the color of their skin, and even their lives put at risk. And so I think all of these things are related. But when I heard that again, I was just touched that I was hearing it so often. And I just wonder if you wouldn't maybe tell us more, speak more about your wife and your relationship, if you would, and then really about your view of the value of people, no matter who they are, what they believe, et cetera.
Yeah, well, so I talked a little bit about my mom earlier, right? My mom was incredibly strong and independent, did things that were unexpected, right? Became a police officer in our town in West Orange, New Jersey, when there were no other women. A woman has never done that before. And, my mom is somebody that really motivated me to try to do hard things and try to accomplish hard goals. And then I met Gabby, and I saw a lot of, similar qualities in Gabby. Doesn't take no for an answer, works incredibly hard. I think she works harder than any member of Congress that I knew of. It was just the amount of stuff that she could pack into a day was just incredible. And then to watch what she went through after she was nearly assassinated. She was shot in the head from 3 feet away with a 9mm round, and was in the hospital for 6 months, was in another outpatient rehab for a year after that, rarely complained. She just would talk about, just the future. Move ahead, she would say. We got to move ahead. We've got stuff to do. We've got to accomplish whatever the goal is. I mean, she's the toughest person I have ever met. And I have tremendous respect for her and what she went through. And then to try to continue to make a difference in the world and never complain about it and never give up. So she's like my inspiration to even, consider running for public office. Because when you think about what, Gabby went through and what our family went through, and it's obviously connected to her service. She was at work when she was injured. You might think that folks would just say, hey, I've had enough of that. Well, that's certainly not in my DNA. And it is definitely not in my wife Gabby's DNA. I mean, she'd be the first person, out there on, she'd be on the front line of any battle, despite the challenges that she currently faces. So she's an inspiration for me, and for so many other folks around the country. And it's very unfortunate for what happened to her and those other individuals, 6 individuals that died that day, including Christina Taylor Greene and others, and 12 other people injured, and then Gabby. But Gabby is just works so hard every single day to try to make a difference. Works on her rehabilitation, and just wants to be part of the solution here and helpful.
Thank you.
Mark, one question from the Arizona contingent out here, and that's what can the country learn from Arizona and its people? What do you plan on taking from here to Washington, and what lessons do you anticipate sharing with those around you?
Well, I think the one thing that there's a lot of stuff that makes Arizona special and unique, but I think it's like the history of independence and working across the aisle. I mean, we're the state of Barry Goldwater and John McCain and Gabby Giffords. And I think other states can take a lesson from us here in Arizona. And I hope to bring that, and it's by far the best place I've ever lived. I mean, nothing comes as a close second.
Not even the space station? Wait a second.
The space station's good for a couple of weeks. That's about it. You don't want to live on the space station forever. You don't want to live on the space station for a year like my brother did.
Yeah.
That you talk about like water issues and other issues. Living in space, you think we have water problems here in Arizona? The water on the space station, you're recycling it, like all of it. So the stuff that goes through you.
I think I know what that means.
Yeah, you're drinking it again. So, I hope to bring the special parts of Arizona to the U.S. Senate if I get the opportunity.
That was the ultimate, and you think you have it bad. So I definitely can't one up that.
I'm curious your thoughts, just to expand more. We talk a lot about how there's not enough bipartisan cooperation and friendship and working across the aisle these days, especially when compared to looking back, even in presidencies 10, 20 years ago, that we've just really been polarizing even more over the last decade. But the problem with polarization and division goes beyond our leaders, and we have a couple people asking about what people can do just among their friends and their family and in their communities to engage in kind of more civil dialogue and debate at a time where many are finding that pretty difficult.
I think it should be on all of us to look for opportunities to build relationships with folks that don't think exactly like we do. I embrace those friendships in my life. I have friends that are, politically think about things like totally differently than I do. And those relationships are some of the most important ones to me. And I make sure that I maintain them. And I also think that like the world we live in today makes this harder in some ways. Social media makes it harder. Twitter and Facebook, they're incredible tools for communication. So they're really important, but at the same time, it does tend to promote divisiveness in society. And I think people just have to, take this stuff with, a little humility maybe, and a little bit like don't hold grudges. In politics, you see like politicians will often be, they'll that's certainly not in my nature. I mean, if there's somebody, in the United States Senate that has said some bad stuff about me, I'm not going to care when I get there at all. I'll try to, have the best relationship with all other 99 U.S. senators if I happen to be elected to this office here in a couple weeks.
Thank you.
So I think what many of us are hearing now is that you have a strong intent to reach across the aisle if you're called upon to serve. Which coming from a military background, I certainly appreciate that, and we see that. But it's often difficult when you have to choose a party when you're running in this country. What risk do you run by no longer being independent, as you said you were 2 years ago? And do you still feel that you can remain independent even though you're now attached to a political party?
Yeah, I mean, you are, right? And you also have a voting record, right? When you start voting on things, and you've got to make decisions based on, hey, what do I think is in the best interest of the state and the country? And somebody can attach a label to that. I get that. I totally do. And I always find it very interesting how they, say members vote with the party, this percentage of the time. I saw that with Gabby, but with other members, you're voting with your party this percentage of the time. I think people often don't realize a lot of those votes are like naming the post office, right? And everybody votes the same way. It's like 100% of the people voted yes. So that aside, I mean, I'm just going to do my best to reach across the aisle, to not be beholden to the political party, to do what's in the best interest of our state and our country, to make decisions based on science and data and facts, not dismiss the science, not dismiss opinions. I'll be looking for, I also realize I don't, have all the answers. So I'm going to be looking for, input from both sides of the aisle, or both sides, of the all sides of the political spectrum.
Oh, thank you for that answer. I think that's important to hear from sitting out here. But I think on a national level, people appreciate hearing that too. And it's tough when you don't have a voting record for people to trust that statement as it's coming out. And so we look forward to seeing how things go and seeing where your trajectory takes you. So I know we're closing in on the end of time, and there will be some questions out there. But given your time around talking with people in Arizona, I know you've felt the divisions among this country. What have you been doing to help bridge those divisions among the people, not just the people and the populations in the cities here and the counties across Arizona? What have you been doing to communicate and try to bridge those relationships on a personal level, not necessarily at the political level nationally?
Well, I mean, a personal level, I'm reaching out to groups and individuals from all different backgrounds. And it's hard for me to say the word, that it's not political, but say Republicans. So I reach out to and get a lot of advice from Republicans in Arizona, and independents and Democrats. So I'm trying to bridge that political gap, but also with organizations, business organizations, chambers of commerce, who often would support my opponent, which is fine. But that I still value the opinion of these organizations that are trying to, help businesses and try to create good paying jobs and support our economy. So it doesn't matter to me, if an organization has, supported somebody else in the past. I'm still going to look for their help when I need it to do the job of a United States Senator if I'm elected.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing all the insight that you have. And I know it's a unique experience for all of us sitting here. I think it's a great opportunity for us. I think we've been we've got a great attendance here, and I know a number of people have reached out to me to say they're going to be viewing this later. I know. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us in terms of a message that you think we should take with us to our audience and our community?
Well, I think I think what you guys are doing is great, and I know you've been at it for a while, and it all helps, right? It makes any time we can try to foster relationships across the aisle and bring some more independence to our politics. I think that's a good thing. I think the message, for your supporters out there is that from my perspective, what you're doing is the kind of thing that really helps make our democracy stronger, and especially now in a time we really need it. So please keep it up, keep working hard. It really matters. It makes a difference. I know in government and politics, it often seems that change does often take a long time, but eventually we can also make these like step function changes at a given time. And the focus that you're taking, I think, is the right one. And I really appreciate that you, Mindy and Evan and CJ, you're taking this approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to speak with you. And CJ mentioned, we've got a lot of people tuning in and appreciating now, and a lot of people who will see this after the fact, and we'll be sending it out to our Stand Up for Public members across the country and in Arizona. And I think many will be encouraged by your unifying approach to leadership. We certainly need it now. We need leadership based on facts, based on science and data, as you put it. No one better than a former combat pilot and NASA astronaut to lead the charge with facts and data and science in our national leadership. So I appreciate your being here and talking to us, and for your voice out there and everything you're doing and your approach to helping the country through such a challenging time.
Well, thank you, Evan, CJ, Mindy. Thank you so much for having me join you today.
Thank you so much. And just final words. I'm sure everyone joining doesn't need this message, which is make sure you vote. Cast those ballots. It's such an important civic duty. We're heartened to see kind of record turnout across the country, it appears. You may not need that message, but please, in these final days, this is the time to encourage your friends and your family to do their civic duty and cast those ballots in such an important year and time for our country. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank you.